Great. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's AMA. I'm super excited. This is an AMA for Tech and HS School, and we have Sylvia Tom, the ex-CTO of Zalora, who will be conducting today's session. So we have 30 minutes with Sylvia today. We are taking questions, so feel free to drop them in the chat box, and we'll try to go through as many of those as possible. But why are we all here today? So we're here because TIA School is launching our new growth program. The reason we developed this program is to really help first-time founders in particular figure out how to build traction. And traction is one of the most important metrics that early stage founders should focus on. It is, if you're fundraising, whether or not you're fundraising, but it's one of the main things that people look at to see, like, are you actually producing a product or services that people are eager to purchase and buy? And it can be an indicator as to like how large your overall startup may be able to grow. So for TIA School, we're developing this whole 6-week program. It's all geared towards helping first-time founders figure out how to build traction. We'll be teaching tools and methodologies. And Sylvia is one of both our mentors as well as the lecturers for growth. So we wanted to do this AMA session with her today so she can kind of talk about her journey and her particular approach to the product-led growth process and how she really thinks about some of these questions. So, hey, Sylvia, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Maria. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, so you have a very long and storied career in terms of product and growth. So do you mind giving everybody a quick introduction of your product journey?
Yeah, I love to. So, in one way or another, I think, I've always been doing product management. For the first couple of years, I was working in the music industry, but I think the more, relevant part of my career have been the last 12 years in digital products. So I was working at a couple of startups, and the longest stretch I had at Zalora. I joined Zalora at the beginning of 2013. That's also when I moved to Singapore, when I moved to Southeast Asia. And then fast forward almost 9 years, I stayed with the company and have been going through various growth phases. So there's growth as a product person, there's growth as a professional. The company was, of course, one of the very fast growing company. So learned a ton of things along the way. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so when you joined Zalora in 2013, what was the company like? Like, how many people were there? What product were you working with at that point in time? What did you walk into?
Yeah. So the company was barely 1 year old. And I think my biggest surprise and actually shocker was that there were already so many people in the company across the region. So it already had like various offices in like I think 7 or 8 different markets, and there were all these different teams. The tech team, however, was still fairly small. So they just started to build out the tech team in Singapore. And so that I found like super interesting. I totally bought into the company vision. I was very familiar with the business model and the strategy behind it, because there was already a similar company in Europe, founded a couple of years ahead. So yeah, that's what attracted me. But it was totally unclear to me, like how much growth there would be, and especially that I would stay this long. Actually, I think throughout the years, one thing that describes it really well is that the company was a different company every year. And so part of my success story in like staying with the company for that long and just following the same flow was that I was also super open, and I was always just thinking like, okay, let's see what happens next. Let's see what opportunities are there for me. Let's see what kind of decisions the company makes, and so I just went along with it.
Great. All right. Then from a like working with Zalora from the product perspective, like the company changed every year. Can you also take us through maybe a bit of the product journey? I honestly don't even know this. Do you like start with the website? Do you start with the app? Like, how did you watch the product evolve as well? What were some of the big stages?
Yeah. Okay, so this is a bit of a blast from the past because we like it's hard to imagine this right now. We actually launched with a desktop website and there was not a mobile website. There was not a mobile app. Yeah, totally unimaginable
It was
nowadays.
2013, right? It kind of made sense.
Yeah, even earlier. I mean, it was launched like, yeah, in 2011, they started to work on that website and then was launched like 2012. So yeah, everyone was in that mindset. And I think also because a lot of people the initial like founding members were coming from Europe, because the investors kind of send them over. There was this mindset of like, yeah, stuff's happening on your computer, on your laptop. And so that was the first thing that was built and launched. But luckily, like very quickly, we understood like, oh no, okay, we're on the brink of a huge change. Like mobile usage is exploding. So then when I joined, we quickly started to build like mobile apps, iOS and Android. And yeah, that was an important shift. And quickly they became like the number one platform. And even now to this day, this is where most of the customers and the users are. Yeah. Then another thing that was, and I think this is still like not so well known, but it was not just the customer facing products that we built. So we also built a number of tools which were used internally by the Zalora operational teams. So really for the back office and like highly customized and specialized for e-commerce. And then in the later years, this software and those tools also evolved into something that the brand partners were actually very eager to use. There's nowadays actually a big part of the tech stack that's B2B and that are services that any brand that wants to come to Southeast Asia and do business and any fashion and lifestyle retailer can dip into the services and then get started very quickly with Zalora as a service provider. Yeah.
Cool. So I think you've just described like, every founder's product dream, right? Where you start with like the customer facing one, but then you kind of like add on. And then of course, like the company, the product as well as the company matures and can start to service like more and more markets. But of course, for our target audience of first time founders, there's a lot of focus on that initial product and the initial engagement with customers. So as Zalora's product is maturing, then can you also talk about from the product and tech team, like how you guys were thinking about the funnel and your North Star metric, right? So was it in the beginning, was it always traffic? Was it shopping cart size? Like what were some of the evolutions that we saw in terms of the North Star metric for the company as well?
Yeah, so definitely for a long time, for the first couple of years, there was always like huge focus on like customer acquisition and like how much traffic are we getting in. But yeah, nevertheless, the conversion funnel was equally important. And so from the product side, we looked at it all along the way. We also looked in a bit more into things like I think adding payment methods and adding delivery services is something that evolved very quickly in Southeast Asia. And I would call it a part of the localization strategy, just because it's so diverse for every different market that you're targeting. So I think it's a lot more complex also to do that and to kind of like tweak those metrics and the investment that you have to make to stay on track than, let's say, in other parts of the world.
All right. And then I think as you're also considering your funnel, like did Zalora have traction from the very beginning, or what did it feel like within the company to know whether or not you were like there was traction for the product?
Yeah, so I'm sure. So in the first year when I wasn't at the company yet, I'm sure there were moments where it was really difficult to get traction. And then over time, I mean, actually thanks to the Zalora marketing team, I think Zalora had always like a really strong digital marketing team, and they were driving customer acquisition. So when I joined, there was definitely already some traction there. We just had to see like, okay, how do we do it, in the most in a way that makes economical sense, and how can we drive it also with partnerships. So there was some interesting partnerships that we introduced, whether it was with brands or with just other companies across the region to sort of bring in new traffic. And the key thing was always, and this was also, yeah, very interesting for me in the early days, how can we get people to trust buying things online, right? Like, I think the trust was definitely in certain countries like Indonesia, for example, was just not there. Like, people were really unsure. I'm going to pay for something, and then are the goods really going to arrive? So it was like those early days. Like, luckily, as a whole industry, I think we've overcome that to a certain extent. But those were, for me, some very interesting problems to solve from product and UX perspective.
Great. Okay, so then for product and growth, like what do you think defines, if I asked you to like describe the product and growth journey, like how would you kind of describe the overall experience, and what defines like a really good product or growth manager?
I think at the core of it, and this is also, I think, probably true for any company stage, is that you have to understand your customers super well, right? And like spend time with them, like talk to them, get feedback. And I think that's really what starts the whole thing of like product-led growth. Like, at first you understand the problem that you're trying to solve for your customers, but then it goes beyond that, right? Like, how do you make sure that they also stick with your product, and maybe even refer it, and so on and so forth. And I think all of those insights are coming from like good data that you can analyze. So that kind of tells you what people usually can't express, and or can't articulate, I mean, what's happening on a high level. But then at the same time, also really doing customer interviews and talking to them, because then you find out things that the data really can't show you. Sometimes what I see, there's companies who are focusing a little bit too much on one thing or the other. And in the beginning, when you don't have the data, yeah, of course, the main thing is to rely on interviews and to meet with your target audience.
Yeah, I think what you said about relying on one thing or focusing too much on one thing or another, what somebody told me once is like, product management in particular is really like jumping from problem to problem and being able to like fix each one in a very structured and like logical problem before you jump onto like the next hot issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, actually one of my colleagues and friends once said, like, don't you think like we really like to like fall in love with our problems? And I said like, oh my God, yeah, that's really true. And yeah, it's so true for me also. I would almost dare to say, it's part of my personality. When someone says like, yeah, I have this, I don't know how to, how can I figure it out? Like, my mind immediately is just going like, okay, have you tried this? Have you tried that? So yeah, that's definitely, I think, a, a, a good trait, a good personality trait of a product person.
Okay, so the growth framework, we've heard about like AARRR, right? So do you have like a particular part of the funnel that you like to work on that's like your favorite part of the puzzle to solve?
um no, not really. Because I think everything depends also on the context, kind of like, what happened before, like what have you been trying to do before, or what direction do you want to take in this particular moment. So yeah, yeah, I can't say like I'm a big fan of one particular phase.
All good. Okay, so then I think going back to a little bit more on the growth program, what do you think? I mean, so you've graduated from Zalora and you're now mentoring and advising a lot of startups. So based on all this experience, like where do you see a lot of early founders or product managers kind of getting like they're just kind of approaching the product from I wouldn't say a wrong perspective, but like they could be approaching the product from like a slightly smarter perspective. Any particular issues that you see people get stuck on over and over again?
Yeah, what I see every now and then is that people maybe spend a little bit too much time on building the product. Um, a couple of months or sometimes even a year before they then really launch and go out and have people try it. So then I'm always a bit like surprised and say like, oh wow, you've made already, like it can be a pretty substantial investment. I mean, if it's not in terms of money, then for sure in terms of time. And yeah, if you think about it, if you take a step back and think about it, like it's very risky, right? You make this huge investment upfront without actually knowing, like, okay, are you solving the problem in the end? Are you targeting the right audience? I mean, there's so many hypotheses then built around a product that it creates a lot of pressure in particular. Yeah, so I would say one thing to watch out for is to not spend too much time in the lab and in your own mind and with your own vision, but yeah, to really get out there and try it out, like throw yourself into the water, the cold water.
Okay, but I think a lot of people would be like, but what am I trying out if I don't have a product? So what is your answer to that?
Yeah, of course, like you have to have a product, but nowadays it's like so easy actually to um even without any design skills, you go to one of those tools like Sketch or Figma, and those tools are amazing, right? And they only developed, like most of them only developed in the last 5 years, especially, or 10 years, but especially those with like a high fidelity design. So I think anyone can learn that pretty quickly. And even with a click dummy, you can meet some people and try it out, get their opinion. And nowadays there's also some tools where, from this design, it's without any coding effort, you can use some sort of a script to then get like a small prototype of an app, and people get the real feeling on their phone. So definitely, like, the technology available, like to try things out really quick, has also evolved so much and is really helpful.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yes, there's definitely a ton of no code and low code tools out there. And this is a big focus, I think, of one of the boot camps is to kind of get founders to think differently about how they can simulate their product without actually going hardcore deep investment on actually developing the
Exactly.
product at the beginning. All right. And then once you have your product ready, then of course, like the next part is to start bringing on users. Are there any experiences that you remember with like growth experiments in terms of like what you guys were trying in the very beginning as Zalora, like ways that you were trying to engage users and customers?
um Yeah, I think, this is where it really helps to have an expert on the team on, like, who are the different groups, different target groups you can get in touch with. So at Zalora, like I said, we always had like an amazing digital marketing team, but also partnerships were super important. So this were some of the big growth drivers for Zalora. But I think for other founders, it really depends on the product and your target audience, and maybe and how you I mean, there must be something around the original vision that you have, where you already have a connection point with your user base, and then hopefully you can expand it and grow it from there.
All right. And then for other people who they've gone out, they've found the users are not staying or they're not sticking, then how do you diagnose that problem?
Yeah. Um, that's for sure going to happen at some point. That, yeah, I mean, that always happened, that people don't adopt it, or that they drop off, or maybe you got your first success, but they don't return kind of like as frequently as you want to. I think this is where when really like product experimentation comes in. And sometimes you have to tweak certain parts of your funnel to like gradually improve it. Sometimes root cause is really so deep that you can only get behind it with like a couple of customer interviews. And actually, like customer interviews, I think for those people who have never done this before, there might be a bit of a mystery around like how many people do you need to speak to. And it's not like, if you like in the old days, or if you come from like you have a bit of a statistical background, then people always think like, oh, I need to speak to 100 people. Actually, it's not like that. It's actually really fantastic. There's some great research around that. If you just speak to 7 people, they will already tell you like 70% of your problems, or the things that they're stumbling upon that are not so straightforward for them. And that's a fantastic ROI. So yeah, that's always something that I used when people were sort of doubting, like, oh, but you only spoke to a handful of people. Like, how can we really rely on that? Yeah, even if it's just like a handful, or 7 or 10 is kind of the magic number, you will already find out a lot.
Wow, that's super interesting. Okay, so definitely when it comes to talking to people, and one thing that I've heard like our founder and CEO Willis say to me a million times is like, it is better to get 10 really in-depth interview than like 50 to 100 people on like some sort of survey form link where they're just like clicking through, because you can really go in depth. You can start to understand the problem, like the context of their problem, and it gives you like a much richer understanding of the issue that you're dealing with.
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah, that's definitely also my experience, and I think yeah, a philosophy that most company and most product-led teams are following now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Any particularly memorable customer interviews that you'd like to share with everyone?
Um, there's always surprises, yeah, because I mean that's so. Unfortunately, I don't have like an anecdote or something, but for sure, yeah, when you're working at a company and you are so familiar with your product, like you know it inside out, you have so many assumptions, and then when you get someone in with like fresh eyes, or they're using the product in different context, or then you get some really surprising answers. And I always loved those situations when the team came back to me and said like, oh, have a look at this snippet. Like we didn't think about this at all. Like we thought that what we came up with here is so great, but actually people are using it a completely different way. Those are the parts that I like the most, when users were actually figuring, yeah, almost like hacking our product and using it in a different way than we intended it in the mock-up.
Yeah, it's not quite the same, but I think this is like the origin story of Slack, for example, is like it was actually built for a previous company. They built it as like an internal messaging tools for all their developers to stay on board. And then the main company failed, but then they were like, but this messaging board that we've like figured out, it seems really, really useful. And then of course it became Slack. And so yeah, it's just like how people use it and whether or not you've developed a really sticky product, I think can lead a long way. And sometimes the users are the best ones to tell you which way to go with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so we just have a few minutes left, and I think we've covered a bunch of the questions. So I just want to talk a little bit about TIA Growth Program, which you're obviously a very integral part of. But so for everyone who's tuned in, TIA Growth Program, it's a 6-week program. We're kicking off our first cohort in the second week of May. And basically, we're just going to follow like an overall 4-step process where the goal is like we take anybody who's a first-time founder and you have at least an MVP. And then so we'll run a startup self-assessment with you so we kind of can identify where the bottlenecks are for your particular startup. Like, are you struggling with like where you're specifically struggling with any product or growth issues? And then based on that startup self-assessment, we'll kind of take you through like common ways to kind of to address those challenges and those bottlenecks head on. And then we assign you one-on-one to a mentor. So for the vast majority of the 6-week program, you'll be working one-on-one with a mentor who will be running weekly experiments with you to kind of identify like, okay, like we tried this, here are the results. How do we interpret the results? Like what does it mean? Should we try it again? Should we tweak it? Should we drop it? Whatever. Because we've heard that this is where a lot of first-time founders are just struggling to get that objective insight from somebody else from somebody else to take a look at their startup and the growth challenges. And so that is the overall plan. And then of course, along the way, plan on, we'll be giving you lots of different tools and templates so that you can go ahead and like use all of those for your own startup's growth well after the program. Yeah. So then we have 10 plus mentors sign up right now. It's pretty exciting. I think they're all, of the very experienced product and growth managers. Sylvia is definitely going to be a mentor for us. We have a lot of other great people as well. And so we'll be assigning out based on like industry and matching between the mentors. So Sylvia, when you were earlier on in your product journey, do you think this kind of program would have been useful, or what were some things that you had wished you had known back then?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's incredibly useful, if you have someone, because usually when you're starting out, you can just ask kind of like your family and friends, right? And this program like really gives you like some good guidance along the way, and the opportunity to speak with some people who maybe already experienced a situation where you might get stuck and you don't know how to move in. So I think this like this structured approach that we're going to do week by week, but also then tapping into the experience of the Tech in Asia team and the mentors is going to be super helpful. And I'm personally extremely excited to see also what kind of teams and startups are applying. So I'm incredibly curious, what kind of ideas are out there. And yeah.
I've been in a lot of interviews this week, and we have like a super diverse application base from across Southeast Asia. We also have like agri-tech, like travel tech, health tech, ed tech, like basically fintech for sure, like anything. We just have like a really, really solid and exciting group of startups and founders. So definitely pumped for that. Yeah, so applications close at the end of this week. So if you haven't applied already, we would definitely encourage you to apply. You can find the application at school.techinasia.com. The program does come with a program fee, so we don't take any equity because we're not an accelerator or incubator. We really just want to help support first-time founders. So the program fee is $999 USD. That's a special intro rate. And so we hope that, if you are a first-time founder, if you're struggling with growth, or you're just looking to kind of like get down the fundamentals and really learn the basics or refresh your memory about product and growth best practices, this program might be a good fit for you. So definitely we would encourage you to check it out. All right. I think that's mostly it for today. Sylvia, any parting words from you?
Thanks for the awesome question. So yeah, thanks a lot for the audience for tuning in, posting your questions, and of course, thanks to Maria and the Tech in Asia team for having me. It was good fun, and I'm looking forward to the school in May.
Absolutely. All right, Sylvia, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. Everyone at home, thanks for tuning in, and hope to see your applications.